Hello, everybody. We will now get started. Thank you so much for joining us for this Society and Citizenship webinar, looking at building...
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think your link is still on, so it's very echoey.
Let me turn that off. Oh, no. Okay, hi, everybody. Sorry for that. My name is Quinn, and I'm presenting today in partnership with Charlotte Bonner, both of us from NUS's Department for Sustainability. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Society and Citizenship webinar, looking at building partnerships in your local community. So we get started. And of webinar protocol as we begin here. Please make sure to mute your microphone until the Q&A period at the end, so as to prevent any background noise, which will obviously affect everybody's ability to participate in the webinar. Also, make sure to ask any technical or content-related questions on the message board, and we'll make sure to respond to those right away. So you can just pop those in the chat box in your bottom right-hand corner, and if you're having any technical problems, we'll also be able to deal with that as we go along. Make sure to really make the most of this webinar by asking lots of questions and by really engaging in a dialogue. We want to make sure that the next hour is really useful and productive for all of you. So do make sure to ask those questions and really get engaged. What are we going to be covering today? The purpose of this webinar is to really look at how we can reach beyond the walls of campuses and look at building partnerships in our local communities. So we'll be exploring the different ways in which building partnerships in your local community can benefit students' unions and, most importantly, students themselves. We'll be having a particular focus on sustainability and the environment, and we'll really discuss how these community partnerships tie in with other agendas that students' unions are looking at and focusing on, such as widening participation, outreach and volunteering, community organizing, and student-centered learning. We'll also explore the ways in which community partnerships can actually help students' unions to develop new business models as well. We'll illustrate these examples with tangible case studies. We'll also explore how to initiate new community partnerships within your communities. And at the end, we'll host a question and answer period to wrap up and ensure that all of you are able to leave with new ideas and really clear next steps that are relevant to your current situation and your future plans. So, game plan for what we're looking to cover today. But we also want to make sure that we cover exactly what it is that you're interested in as well. So if anyone has anything else that you would like for us to cover today, feel free to put that in the chat box now, and we'll make sure to pick that up as we go through the discussion. Otherwise, we'll get started and assume that you're happy with the list of things that we're hoping to go through today. As we said, it'll be about an hour, but we're hoping to only be talking for about 40 to 45 minutes, making sure to save about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for much more of a discussion and dialogue between all of you and with myself and Charlotte to make sure that everyone gets the most out of this webinar. We wanted to talk a little bit about why is NUS actually works on sustainability. So NUS works on sustainability and is focused on sustainability because students give us a really clear mandate to do this work. So since April of last year, we've actually been tracking students' attitudes towards climate change. Surveying, we've realized that 77% of students say they're concerned about the effects of climate change, or 60% feel that we're already feeling the effects of climate change. Over 2/3 are actually more likely to vote for a government which would take action on climate change. So we can see from this survey that there's actually a really clear sort of mandate from students to be doing more work around climate change and sustainability issues, but also that it's really at the forefront of students' minds as a major concern. That really reflects this concern from students around sustainability and a real interest in sustainability issues is the NUS HEA survey. So the HEA, or the Higher Education Academy, has partnered with us Last 4, now going on 5 years, to do a major survey across the UK looking at student attitudes on sustainability. So the first 4 bars there reflect that around 85% of students either agree or strongly agree that sustainable development is something that they would like universities to actively incorporate and promote. So students really want to see their universities taking sustainability really, really seriously. The second set of 4 bars there shows that about 70% of students consistently agree or strongly agree that sustainable development is something which university courses should actively incorporate and promote. Not just the university in terms of its infrastructure and its buildings, but actually the university in terms of its curriculum and its courses as well. The bars on this graph show that consistently about 60% of students agree or strongly agree with the statement, sustainable development is something which I would like to actively learn more about. So that shows 60% of students across the UK really wanting to learn more about sustainability through both their formal and their informal curriculum. And everything that we'll be talking about today in terms of community partnerships pose really, really good examples of where students are learning through the informal curriculum in their communities, benefiting their communities, but also benefiting their own learning. A statistic that comes out of this survey that's really quite exciting is that 2/3 of students consistently say that they would willingly get paid £1,000 less per year if the company that they worked for had a good environmental and ethical record. So that means that students are actually willing to make their own sort of personal sacrifices, in a way, to actually work for companies that further values that they agree with. So all of this research shows that students really want to engage with this agenda. So gain really important employability skills, but also really prepare them for their future lives, so that students are graduating as part of the solution to sustainability problems rather than as the problem in themselves. So envision that our sustainability team within NUS works through. Our mission is to really green suppliers and students' unions and help unions to green their institutions and their communities. So we're consistently revising and revisiting this sort of mission and vision to make sure that it is completely up to date, as this is a couple of years old now. But it still reflects our overall goal of making sure that students' unions develop as the green hubs within their communities. So we want to help students' unions build capacity, build knowledge, build skill sets to allow them to be green leaders within their communities. So creating students' unions that not only further student opportunities around sustainability, but the student unions that also push the institution to further its sustainability goals and really play a leadership role within the community. So, in particular, there are 5 main ways in which we try to further this goal. So the first is around sort of sustainability behavior change, so helping students and staff across unions and universities and colleges to adopt more pro-environmental behaviors. The second, which is obviously a big focus of what we're talking about today, is around creating community bridges. So helping unions to actually develop really positive relationships in their communities, so that way students and students' unions are seen as leaders within sustainability and within their communities. The third element is around increasing employability and widening participation. So as we all know, students who get involved in their students' unions have increased employability prospects, and through hearing opportunities and through community engagement, we're able to widen participation of students from a whole variety of different backgrounds getting involved in meaningful ways within our unions. The element of this is creating new income streams for unions. So we'll share a couple of different examples today that actually really demonstrate how students' unions have been able to develop new income streams through working with their local community. The fifth element of our work is around greening the supply chain. So as much about what we'll be focusing on today we'll really be touching on sort of 2 through 4 there. More than anything though, our overall mission and vision is around helping students' unions to really become that sort of green hub in the community and ensuring that students are living education as part of the solution to sustainability problems. So get on over to Charlotte to carry on.
Great. So that gives you a little bit of context about the reasons behind NUS's work in this field, and particularly the benefits that we see from embedding and encouraging kind of wider community outreach and partnerships amongst the student union movement. Does anybody have any questions based on what Quinn's just outlined? Is there anything that anybody would like to add or comment upon? A couple of ways you can do this using the WebEx software, either through the chat function, or you can raise your hand by putting the little raise hand button, which is in the middle, if you want to say anything, and I can unmute you. No? Okay, that's no problem. If anybody's got anything as we go along, then do let me know. The benefits of working well with others in your community are plentiful, and it varies between organisations. And what we're going to do today is look into a couple of case studies of how this has worked really well to date, talk about some of the benefits, how to start initiating these partnerships, and other relevant resources and hubs that NUS has developed that you might find useful. A couple of nice photos here, which I'll just touch base on. We've got in the top right the Go Green programme at Anglia Ruskin University. Their Students' Union and the Lord Ashcroft Business School work together to establish professional student volunteering opportunities in local SMEs, so small, medium-sized enterprises, where the students were enabling sustainability change and writing about the change from within the organisation for their dissertations in their business degrees. We've at hand corner a wonderful example from FE, so the Manchester College and their students who from the Public Services Studies course, and the academics there had been working for a long time to try and get students-based opportunities in the public sector and struggling. But then we came along with our Green Impact programme for the Greater Manchester Fire Service, and the students not only got hands-on practical work-based experience through that auditing process, but also got to, as you can see, dress up as firefighters and go through some fire safety and firefighting training as well, which was much fun. There's numerous growing projects up down the country whereby students are establishing food projects both on and off campus in partnership with their local community organisations. And then finally in the top left we've got an example there from Bradford. Their Students' Union are working in collaboration, the college and the University Students' Union working in collaboration with the local authority and a number of charities across Bradford to improve the accessibility of cycling. So cycling is available to all students as a mode of transport and as a leisure activity, including specifically those students with disabilities. So just a couple of snapshots there, but I really wanted to open this up to discussion. So what do you think the benefits are to taking these connections with local community organisations for both your students and for yourselves as students' unions? There's this moment now where there's silence. Anybody's typing? Okay, technical issues and would like to be saying something that they're not able to do, then just drop Quinn a chat message, and if not, I will carry on talking, assuming that everything is going well. The benefits that we see are plentiful, both for students and for students' unions. One of the things that we have increasingly been told through some of the programs we've supported is that working with local community organisations really enhances the reputation both of students and the student community locally, but also the students' union. Thank you so much. I have seen your comment and I will come on to that very, very quickly. So enhanced reputation for the union as well as for students, which has knock-on impacts. Opportunities and the provision of student volunteer opportunities, student skills development opportunities, curriculum-based opportunities for students, so really strengthening the student experience whilst they're a member of your union. Non-sustainability agendas. So one of the things that we often see through our sustainability work is actually the knock-on impacts on other agendas that are important to unions and local institutions. So, for example, the widening participation agenda and increasing access to higher education, building community partnerships, the volunteering programs we've seen, quite often a huge proportion of the students that get involved are international students, so opening up the Students' Union to a traditionally difficult to reach audience. Lots of strengthening of non-sustainability agendas as a co-benefit of working in this sector. See through shared resources. Nesta, I think this is what you're talking about. So working with other community organisations can make things an awful lot cheaper. So whether that's you've just got a good relationship with a local organisation who can give you or lend you stuff, whether it's by sharing events, you can reduce the resource burden on your union, whether it's by working together, you can actually get more stuff done collaboratively. And there's other efficiency to be found by these partnerships and building them. Credibility. This comes as a result, I think, partly of the enhanced reputation, but as students and students' unions are seen as a positive impact on their local communities, they're given greater credibility as organisations and therefore allowed a voice to implement change, whether it's related to sustainability or not. So finally, enterprise opportunities, and this may be through kind of retail. We see examples of unions who are developing their own products and selling those locally, or through kind of more service provision. So we've got some examples coming up of unions who are delivering programs for local community organisations and actually bringing in income as a result of that. So really entrepreneurially looking at this agenda to see how can we strengthen the students' union movement through the sustainability agenda. And you've just given us a comment there. We've got community wardens who work with the local community and police to ensure that residents are happy. I think this is a really good point. So quite often there is a local conflict between the student community and the non-student community local to universities and colleges. And by ensuring that good communication links, good dialogue between those different parties, as well as showing that students and students' unions can be a real positive impact on their local community, we can that residents are happy, that everybody in the local community is happy with students, with the Students' Union, and that the students are really getting something out of their local community whilst they're based there as well. So working locally with community organisations, I know quite a few of the people here have this as a part of their day job, working in outreach and volunteering. Great, thank you for that. So, there'll be quite a few examples, especially of students who are working with local authorities either on volunteering programs or on sustainability programs, actually starting to build a better dialogue with the local authority to help reduce some of these issues relating to, like you say, rubbish and noise and so on and so forth, and build a better dialogue between the student and non-students living locally to campuses. So that's something that maybe we can talk about a little bit later in more depth if it's of interest to you all. I'm now going to just share with you 3 case studies that show different approaches, different programs that unions have undertaken to various goals, but have resulted in some of these benefits. What I'm going to discuss is the Wild Patch project at the University of Plymouth Students' Union. Is anybody from Plymouth here? Okay. This resulted from the Students' Union's Excellence Project through the Green Impact Students' Unions programme a couple of years ago. And through talking to various people across the institution, the student realised that there was a volunteering opportunity for students that could be established that was funded by Relays, which is the widening participation department at the university. So the participation agenda is there to help improve people's aspirations to attend higher education, to show that regardless of your background, that higher education is something that is available to you. And what they did is they looked at existing relationships they had with schools and discussed with those schools what would be a fun and engaging project for students to work with, so that the school pupils had kind of access to those students so that they could see what kind of experience going to university was, whilst also having some sustainability impacts as well. Wild Patch project was the result of the discussions. And what happened was students were trained in work development as well as in garden building to develop wild patches, so biodiversity hubs in the school grounds. So students would go in, they would set up these wild patches, encouraging wildflowers, insects, for example, birds, for example, and also workshops to deliver to the school pupils so that they could better engage in biodiversity on their school site. There's a lot of monitoring and evaluation attached to this, both in terms of the school students' opinions about biodiversity and sustainability before and after the project, and also their understanding of what university was before and after the project. And this is highly successful. The students were really engaged with the process, and it's something that we continue to run and we're looking to replicate with other organisations. And I know that Josie and Beth are on the line, and that's something that we're now discussing with you up in Cumbria. So really exciting to see how this particular project can be replicated across the UK. Another different issue, and this relates to Catherine and David's point here about local residents and their opinions of students. There was an issue each year at the end of term with rubbish, with students leaving in their houses huge amounts of things for disposal rather than disposing of them responsibly. So the Big Give was established as a partnership between the University of Bristol, the University of Bristol Students' Union, the University of the West of England and the University of West of England Students' Union, as well as local authority and a number of charities locally to encourage students to donate their unwanted goods and just dispose of them. Last year there were 80 tonnes of goods that were donated to the Big Give, which is just a phenomenal figure and shows really the scale of the issue that the project is trying to tackle. Local charities are given preference as to the goods and what they would like and what that is useful for their needs, and the excess is given to the British Heart Foundation. In last year, £200,000 were raised for charity. So really staggering impacts, both in terms of the charities having access to goods that they might not have had access to, whether that's kitchen equipment, whether that's housing equipment, whether that's duvets, all sorts of things that students have been leaving being put to good use. But for their charities and their sustainability as well, a really phenomenal impact. And in terms of the news story here, the dialogue that was built around students volunteering to initiate and enable this initiative, as well as the impacts that it had, were really good in terms of building those relationships further, for raising the credibility and the profile of the union and the student community locally. So a really lovely project. I know this is something that is similarly done at other universities, and Southampton and Solent have been doing something similar for a number of years. So again, quite easily replicable one. But if you have issues with residents and rubbish and relationships with your local authority, one that you might want to look at replicating as well. And then finally, as a case study, I wanted to talk a little bit about the University of Gloucestershire Students' Unions. And they've been running Green Impact as a union for a number of years. Started to see the benefits of taking this off campus. So what they've been doing is working with local organisations to promote the Green Impact model, and then using students, the student drive and commitment and passion for sustainability, developing that, training them in professional skills, and sending students as project assistants out into local organisations to help implement Green Impact programmes. One about the way that this has been developing is that actually the union, rather than NUS, have been delivering green locally and being able to start build an income stream to themselves as a result of this. So acting almost as Green Impact consultants in their local community to strengthen their own sustainability agenda and make sure that their sustainability work has a sustainable income stream itself. It's a really interesting new business model here. Gloucestershire are developing that in the long term we'd like to see other organisations, other unions up and down the country taking on. I just noticed there's something in the chat box from Kate up in Liverpool. So to the Big Give, I believe you're talking about here, working with Merseyside Textile Forum. So great. And the other charities such as the British Heart Foundation also involved. I think they're very open to working with students' unions and students generally. So that might be a great first starting point for unions that want to get started on something similar to that. Quinn, I know that you've been doing a lot of work with Gloucestershire. Is there anything that you want to add to that?
Not a lot. I think you covered most of it off there, Charlotte, but I think the biggest things that they've found that have been exciting for their students is that by training up students and by having them access sort of leaders in the local community and how they're working with Green Impact, or through Green Impact, has actually empowered them to get more involved in other parts of the students' union. So they've found that through sort of as sort of a professional development and an employability opportunity, that students are then actually getting much more involved in other elements of the union as well. So it's really having that sort of knock-on effect. I think also I've been really excited by the positive sort of reception that students have had in all the local businesses that they're working with. So from the county council to Ensley Insurance to a smaller sort of housing authority, where these students are having the opportunity to go, they're actually really seen as respected members of society who have a real role to play in terms of furthering sustainability within all those businesses and within county council and within all these different places. So it's been really sort of win-win for the students' union and for students themselves. So that's exciting to see. And I think all these projects that we're sort of highlighting here reflect the great work happening all across the UK, where students are having those sorts of win-win opportunities where they're getting a lot out of it and they're learning a lot and gaining a lot from these experiences, but the students' unions also are raising their profiles massively as well. But yeah, I'll hand it back to you then, Charlotte.
Great, thank you. Okay, so those are just a couple of cases, and if at any point you would like to those, you want me to hook you up with the people that have been involved in establishing those, if you'd like to replicate them, if you'd like to maybe share your experiences, if you have similar projects with unions, then do let me know. I'm more than willing to facilitate those introductions. So in terms of initiating projects and connections with off-campus organisations, I want to kind of open this up in terms of what worked for you so far with the projects that you've established. I know there's always a slight delay when I ask you questions for the rapid typing, but again, if anybody wants to actually speak, let me know. In the meantime, sitting here in silence, I will continue chat, but any input that people want to have as to things that have worked, then do let us all know. So it's really great if you have existing connections. One of the things that I think the sustainability agenda encourages people to do is look at their existing connections and see, okay, we already have these, how can we work more effectively with these organisations, and how can we make sure that the connections we have are mutually beneficial. So I'm going to give you an example from the University of Staffordshire students a number of years ago. They had similar issues to those that David outlined earlier on in terms of perceptions of students being a nuisance locally, especially with regards to noise and rubbish, for example. And the president of the Students' Union sat on the University Senate alongside a number of local representatives, including the chief executive of the local authority. And they've known each other for a number of months, a number of years, and through discussions about this issue of kind of perceived students locally, the president suggested to the local authority that actually there's some projects that they could do to help improve student image. And as well as establishing a project similar to the Big Give, they also facilitated a student change-making program, whereby students were going into the local authorities to help implement sustainability change. They ran some workshops to talk about what sustainability is. They ran some development sessions for the staff at the local authority so they could better understand sustainability, how it impacts them locally. It was just a really nice way of an existing connection, an existing relationship, but actually exploring what could be taken from them to have mutually beneficial outputs for all involved. Sometimes you don't have those existing relationships, but you know somebody who does. So finding a facilitator is often a good way to get in touch with people as well. Be that somebody in your union already works with an organisation, it might be somebody in your institution already works with somebody in an organisation, or it might be that you know that the NUS has a link with an organisation that you would like to work with, in which case finding a facilitator or an introducer is a really good way to get your foot in the door. And it's quite often easier than cold calling, which is the other area, we call it reaching out here, but it might just be that you identify an organisation you want to work with and just contact them. It might be dropping them an email, it might be giving them a phone call, and sometimes this is more successful than others. It depends on how receptive those people are. Generally, having a facilitator or an introducer I think I've made that word up. Introducer will be more successful than just reaching out at a point. But also, when you are reaching out kind of blindly, it's really useful to think about your communication streams. How are you going to contact them? What is going to be most impactful? So, for example, I mentioned earlier on that up in Cumbria, we're initiating a schools programme, supporting the union there to do something similar to the Wild Patch project I outlined earlier on. And we wanted to build relationships with primary schools local to the 3 campuses up in Cumbria. And what they decided to do was actually to write to their head teachers, to send them a physical letter, which may seem quite old school, but it definitely meant that the teachers took the time to read and start to think about how that project could start being initiated. Whereas obviously we all know that sending an email can sometimes just disappear into the ether. Something that I think NUS's sustainability team has done historically quite successfully is just being very open and responsive. So quite often you will have organisations reach out to you, and it's a case of being honest and what kind of time resources you have to put into a project, but also being very open with information and goals and visions and what you'd like to achieve from potential partnerships. Being responsive and being open to those people approaching you can quite often have very positive consequences. So making sure that you are opportunistic when people reach out to you is a good way to build those connections. Finally, networking. It's got a bit of a bad reputation, I think, networking, the word now, but both at national events but also local events, making sure that you are on the mailing lists and we're invited to local networking events that maybe your local authority organises, local charities organise, can really help to build these connections and see where there are organisations with mutual goals, mutual visions, mutual values that would be ideal to work with and provide opportunities for both you and your students' union. How people have gone about connecting with off-campus organisations or community organisations that have become good partners. Have I missed anything, do you think, here? I've heard of Streetlife, but I haven't actually used it myself. So the web link there that David's put in, and a way to find individuals and sometimes organisations too. Great, we'll have a look at that. In terms of developing those partnerships, we as a national organisation also are trying to forge nationally beneficial partnerships with organisations that can help promote the sustainability agenda both nationally and locally. And some of those links can be very useful to students' unions as well. I've just outlined a couple here. HEFCE, we have a strong relationship with the Funding Council for Higher Education in England, and that has helped us provide support for students' unions across the country through our Students' Green Fund programme. So that's been just one example of a good partnership that had huge knock-on impacts for the sustainability agenda and beyond. With the Trade Union Congress and with a number of trade unions up and down the country, so if there's campaigning work that your unions are doing that you want to build momentum behind, you want to gain support from local organisations, then it might be that those national links that we have would be useful for you. So I wanted to flag that up. We work very closely with an organisation called Change Agents UK, who work to encourage sustainability being embedded in work placements, graduate placements, do a lot of skills development for students and graduates, and facilitate a lot of placements in the workplace related to sustainability. And through our relationship with them, we've been able to provide students with great opportunities over the years, and again, something that you might be able to access and benefit from. We run a number of programs nationally that you can tap into, that you can help deliver, that you can take on delivery of, as the University of Gloucestershire have if you're interested. For example, Green Impact Programme, and there's plenty of information about that online, or you can contact us after the webinar. Quick check off the chat box, because I can see people talking here. So working closely with the Educational Opportunities Department for approach local and primary schools, primary and secondary schools. They already have lots of contacts with them. Fantastic. If you've got a teaching department or an education department, they too will have good links with those schools. Grant from Sheffield Hallam saying that they've built a lot of relationships as a result of attending local community and residents group meetings, and that's those networking opportunities, as well as kind of building those reputations for students and the Students' Union as part of your attendance there, being seen to be proactively supporting the development of a positive local community relationship. So fantastic. earlier on, if there's any relationships that you think NUS has with an organisation that you would like to work with, then do feel free to drop us a line and we'll do that facilitation, we'll do that introduction if it's going to be helpful to you. I wanted to signpost you to a couple of hubs and resources that are online that we weren't going to cover in a lot of detail through this webinar, but are very valuable and are related to what we've been talking about. Fundamentally, developing these partnerships, developing these connections is all about developing change in your local community and for your students and your students' unions. There's a couple of things here about better facilitating change making in your community, whether it's sustainability related or not. First is the Change Programme, which is fundamentally helping students' unions develop better community organisation skills and developing strong community campaigns to better their geographical areas. And the network of community organisers that have been established across the country, and there's just some fabulous resources there, so I recommend that you check that out. And a new deal for the Next Generation Hub, which is all about ensuring that the student voice for the upcoming general election is too loud to be ignored. And I know for a fact that the majority of students' unions in the country are working on their general election strategy, but there's all sorts of information here that will help both in the run-up to the general election, but also beyond it in terms of how the student voice can be strengthened with local community partners. A very simple change-making tool that any student or any non-student can use for that matter is our Snap It Off programme. And a couple of years ago, what some of our research was showing that one of the reasons students weren't getting involved in sustainability programmes is that they could just see so much waste around them, especially energy waste, lights on in the middle of the day, huge buildings being lit up that are empty in the middle of the night, for example. So Snap It Off is a really simple programme where students and non-students can take photographs of wasted energy, upload them to our website via text message or email, and then we facilitate a dialogue with whoever's responsible for that energy waste to try and improve it. Those that submit photos are entered into a monthly prize draw, so a little personal incentive, but fundamentally it's about being the change you want to see and getting rid of energy wastage locally. Things coming out of the chat here. The University External Relations team, a great place to go to facilitate some of those connections with existing university relationships. Thanks, David. So a couple of hubs and resources there that I think, if there's any particular areas that from today you'd like to go and explore further, might be really useful to you. Back to you, Quinn, to wrap up. Just give me a second. Great, over to you, Quinn.
So in terms of what we've covered today and what we've actually really looked through in great detail, so we've talked about the real benefits of building local community partnerships, both for the Students' Union and, of course, for our students. So we've talked about how building local community partnerships can result in a really enhanced reputation, and I think that example from the Bristol Big Give really highlights that through doing that work, through that they were able to connect with lots of those community groups and residents groups, Grant, that you were talking about doing at Sheffield Hallam. The Bristol Big Give meant that students' unions were actually really improving their students' reputations in the community by having a real positive news story coming out at that time of the year when typically it is a more negative news story around student waste. So first, enhancing reputation. Second, around really creating those student opportunities. So seeing students volunteer in different capacities and gaining new really important skills that they may not have otherwise had the opportunity to do so. Also, a lot of good work through those examples and through what you're all talking about in the chat box as well around strengthening the non-sustainability agendas. So working with different educational opportunities departments, working with widening participation groups to look at sustainability as something much broader than just sort of recycling programs or something like that, but actually seeing that the sustainability agenda has really, really positive impacts on broader community agendas that students' unions are already really looking at. Also, as one of the other participants highlighted earlier on, really looking at that sort of efficiency through resources, making sure that students and students' unions have credibility and a louder voice within their communities, and in some scenarios actually having really positive enterprise opportunities as well. And ran through some case studies of different approaches at Plymouth Students' Union, Bristol Students' Union, and Gloucestershire Students' Union. We talked talked about some different ways of how to initiate connections, and maybe this is something that we want to talk about a little bit further in our next sort of 20 minutes for Q&A, which is around sort of what procedures have we used to develop those good connections? What have you guys already done to develop those connections as well? So maybe building on existing connections, reaching out to others, finding a facilitator, attending those networking events, and when people approach you, being really open and responsive to what those opportunities may look like. I think most of all, though, we've really talked about how students can be change makers in their community, and with potential national support from the US, with links with different local and national organizations, we really see students' unions and students themselves becoming absolute leaders in sustainability and on broader agendas as well within their communities. So now we have about 15 to 20 minutes dedicated to having a little bit more of a dialogue and a conversation around all of the issues that we've raised today. So I'm up to all of you to either ask questions, make suggestions, really make the most out of this opportunity to chat with each other, to share some of your stories, and to really think about how we can take this information away to influence the work at our own campuses. So if anyone has either a question, a comment, an experience that they want to share, please either pop that in the chat box or raise your hand through that little hand symbol, and then we can turn over to you to hear a little bit more about your work.
There's a question that was asked earlier on about the slides and the presentation being available after the session. And yes, we have recorded what Quinn and I said, and slides will be going up online on NUS Connect shortly after the webinar this afternoon. So if you want to use it as a reference point, or you want to signpost colleagues to also be able to access the information almost as a tutorial, then those resources will be available to you.
What started while people are thinking out their amazing questions and stories to share is that one thing that a couple of people were sort of talking about and touching on is these sort of end-of-year waste campaigns, so similar to what Bristol Students' Union was leading on around the Bristol Big Give. But have other organizations that are on the line right now done work like that? How have you found that to be successful? Have you found that to be a good way to sort of start working in your local community? Does anyone want to share their story around that?
I'm to find out how I can unmute you, but I think that might be within your control.
I did that. No. Here now, go ahead.
Oh, right. Okay, so I'm at Sheffield and Sheffield University Students' Union and the City Council on a very significant big give for Charters. I was referring to in the comments I made because we're trying to get student volunteers involved in helping with bits of the program. Students clear out their houses prior to the end of term. So we want volunteer students on the streets to help guide student houses through that process. I was wanting to get.
Sorry, I was just asking if you could speak up a little bit, and I'm finding it quite quiet as well. Would you mind potentially turning up your volume or speaking up a little bit?
I'll try talking closer to the microphone.
That's much better. Thank you, David.
Okay, so Sheffield University Students' Union, but working with Sheffield Hallam and British Foundation and the local authority. I'm trying to get students volunteering to help with the process at the end of term, guiding students get stuff from their houses which could be used again, either into the BHF donation points or also into our own Bring It Don't Bin It scheme, so that we can put them into what we call a free shop at the beginning of the following term. But I'm trying to get local residents involved, and I've got some interest through Street Life, and this is really good to build some connections and break barriers between local residents and students. but I mean, it's at the end of term, and they'll pass on good terms, having had a slightly dodgy relationship perhaps during the year. But I'm just looking for ideas, things that we could try earlier on in the year that might involve local residents, if you like, who are the same neighbourhoods as our students. Things that would help relationships between the two early on in the year, so that things are much better as they go along.
Yeah, before Charlotte and I sort of comment on that, does anyone else on the line want to comment at all on any suggestions that you might have for David at Sheffield Hallam for strategies that could be used around engaging residents early on in the year rather than just at the end of the year? I'm potentially thinking of suggestions. I can say a couple of things. So I was actually still working at Bristol last year during the Bristol Big Give, and two of the strategies that we used to engage residents a little bit earlier on was we sent them a letter sort of almost beginning of the second term, so still halfway through the year, but not at the very end of the year, to notify them of the upcoming work that we were planning to do around the year-end clear-out. So we were notifying them of the Bristol Big Give sort of donation points that were going to be installed in their neighbourhoods, so as a little bit of an FYI for them, so that way that didn't come up as a surprise to have a donation point installed at the end of their street, but also to talk about already trying to frame the student move out in a more positive light, so trying to make sure that residents were aware that how many thousands of students were going to be moving out that summer, but that both universities and both students' unions, in partnership with the City Council, were really looking at this quite proactively and looking at the positive community role that students could be playing. In that letter, we had councillors sort of voice their support as well for the program. So right from the get-go, we were trying to make sure that the entire move-out period was going to be seen in quite a positive way. And I know since that point, Bristol has done some work in terms of doing that same sort of model of sending out letters to neighbourhood groups and to residents themselves, just communicating that work that student unions are already doing, but just making sure that residents are actually aware of that and making sure that students are framed in that positive light of the positive community impact that they're making in many ways. Austin has also just added there in the comment box, part of this year we used student volunteers to work with local community groups, the Biblical Gate Community Association, to deliver a Love Where You Live booklet, which was essentially a small information pack containing info about rubbish collections, key contacts in the area, etc. Awesome. So great. It's a really good example of sort of that proactive approach to students loving where they live and get engaged in their communities right from when they move in.
As earlier on mentioned, local residents groups, and it's a really good thing to promote to maybe second and third year students. It might be that you want to establish kind of almost a rep system, so for the different sections of the city or the town that you work in. So there's a student rep from each of those geographical areas that can participate in those residents associations, but enable that dialogue between the residents and the students' unions to really be sure that there is a good stream of communication so that people know what the issues are and they can start to discuss how to better work together. So actually engaging both the students and local residents in the development of whatever that beginning of the year initiative looks like. So it's owned by them might be a good idea. Yeah.
It's also just added here that they're looking at starting a Hey Neighbour scheme at the beginning of term to encourage good student residents at the beginning of term, organising resident/student mixers off campus to encourage communication from the start. They also have a group of student volunteers, street reps, visit student addresses, residents may be having issues with, to encourage a student-to-student conversation and education. That's awesome, and I think that sort of peer-to-peer communication around students working with other students to improve their sort of community work is a really positive way to do it, and sort of like highlights that leadership in a way that everyone wants to have happy, healthy neighborhood relations, and by having students actually lead that process a little bit is really exciting to see. Thanks for sharing the example.
Just a little bit about the resident-student mixes off campus, what they look like, and because it might be something that other unions might be able to facilitate, but I'm not sure what it's like. I'm not sure whether you're able to speak to us. Thank you very much. It's always slightly odd running a webinar when you're sat in a room talking to yourself, and you know whether other people are typing or not typing. So thank you for answering that question. We look forward to your response.
Is typing out, are there any other questions at all that people want to have answered before the end? Feel free to pop those into the chat box now, and then we'll aim to address those just before we wrap up. We've only got about another 5 minutes or so altogether.
So conducting a survey for students and residents to see if they would attend events off campus to meet their new neighbours, what would make them attend, etc. What would make them attend? I like that. At the moment it looks like local community centres plus free food. Classic. Great. Okay, so that's a really nice way. I had in my head something around kind of almost like a street party, which again would probably be better in the summer, but it depends on your term times. That might also be a nice thing to facilitate. But that looks really exciting. And Jess, it might be that we keep in touch and see how that goes, because if there's resources and toolkits that we can develop for students' unions to be able to replicate that, then that's something I'd be interested in exploring with you. Great. Any other questions before we wrap up?
Okay. If there's nothing else, we will leave it at that. But thank you all so much for sharing so many different ideas with one another, for asking questions, and for contributing so much good information about what you're already doing incredibly well at all of your unions. Just as we wrap up, do feel free to contact each other again through the E&E Gist mail. I hope that many of you are already on this Gist mail, but it's a great resource to find other student officers and staff working in student unions across the UK to share resources and share ideas around sustainability work, community work, and other projects that you're working on. So do make use of that Gist mail to look for support, look for suggestions on your projects, and to also really share good practice. Our main sustainability email address is also there, so feel free to reach our team for any other support, any other questions, or with suggestions, as Charlotte was saying there, for resources or support that we could also be developing as well. Please do keep in touch. You can find Charlotte's contact details and my contact details there, so don't ever hesitate to drop us a line if you want to have a conversation about any of this. We're very, very keen to be supporting students' unions in becoming these sort of green leaders within their communities, and so whatever you think we could potentially do that, whether that's through making an introduction to a national organisation, making introductions to key contacts, supporting you with designing some of your programs, or just helping you to share your good practice that you're already doing so well, please do not hesitate to get in touch. We will wrap it up. Thank you so much for all taking part today. As we mentioned throughout, the entire webinar recording will be available on our website. If you just Google NUS webinars, that'll take you right to the link. I also had the link in the chat box earlier on, so you can access the recording of this webinar, our past webinars, and also see the schedule for our future webinars as well. But we'll leave it at that. Thank you all very, very much for joining in today, and we'll speak to you all soon. Thank you. Bye.